What's good, Steelers Nation? How we doing? How we doing? Hope you guys have had a fantastic week. Not much happening in Steelers world, but we did get a schedule release. I wanted to kind of give some takes on that. Talk a little bit about the schedule, some things I'm excited about, some things I find particularly interesting. We'll go over some other like quick news stuff that's just kind of transpired over the past couple of days since we last were live on Friday. I think the big thing is like the Cam Hayward stuff. I think everybody's kind of wanting to talk about that. Just with him announcing that he's going to, be sitting out OTAs and all that stuff. We can get into that. But yeah, I want to talk about the schedule. I think that's really pertinent. I think that's the big hitter here. And then also, I'll answer any questions in the chat or anything like that that you guys have afterwards. Probably going to stream for 25 30 minutes if we get enough people in here and there's enough to talk about. We talk anything football, Steelers draft, anything y'all want to talk about, as we kind of get into it. And then we'll talk about some stuff that's upcoming on the channel I'm really excited about. Drop some hints on that kind of stuff as well. So we should see if I can share my screen with you guys, pull the schedule up. Okay. All right. So yeah, I mean, I think first thing that stands out, man, kind of a bummer. I think we knew that the Steelers weren't going to be at home for the home opener or the week one opener, just because the Pirates play in Pittsburgh those first, I think, 2 weekends. So we knew that we weren't going to get a Steelers home game. I'm guessing that has to do with like parking and stuff like that. But it is kind of a bummer. I think back, like I was at the last Steelers week one home opener in what was that 2014. That was the Antonio Brown like kick the punter in the face game. So kind of interesting there. But nonetheless, I think it is interesting that they are starting at Atlanta. I feel like NFC opener is kind of unusual for sure. um and then kind of a nice little revenge game week two for us. We head to Denver. I think that'll be a exciting game. The things I really want to talk about is just like the opening of the schedule. I feel like the first, really 3 weeks in particular. I mean Indy as well. Those first like 3 4 weeks, five. I mean, really the first half of the schedule. I feel like they have pretty winnable games. I'm not sitting here saying that they're gonna, start out like 6-2 or 7-1 or anything like that. But there's no games in the beginning of the schedule that like just jump off to me as like, all right, we're just gonna chalk this up as an L. It's not gonna be a situation where they're going to be able to get off to a hot start. The Steelers have gotten off to some slow starts, in the past couple of seasons, and I think you can probably anticipate that there is going to be a little bit of a slow start, potentially this year with just like so many moving pieces, man. Particularly on offense, you think about all the turnover. They're probably going to be Broderick Jones probably going to be going to left tackle. It seems like they're going to be starting hopefully two rookies and Fautanu probably at right tackle if I had to guess right now, and then Zach Frazier. Hopefully he's the week one center. And then you think about it, you're bringing in a new quarterback too. So a new quarterback, new offensive coordinator. There's just a lot of moving pieces on offense. So it may take them a second to kind of gel a little bit, which I honestly kind of think, I think that's honestly kind of maybe a blessing in disguise. I feel like there's been a lot of negative thoughts about the schedule. We could hit on some of the things that are definitely less than ideal. But I feel like probably every fan base feels like they got slighted in some regard and whatever. But, I think the crazy division schedule is definitely different, man. I don't know that has that ever happened. I haven't seen anybody talk about the historical standpoint or perspective of that, but I feel like not playing a division game for the first 10 weeks is like really unheard of. I can't remember a time that I've ever seen it. Appreciate you, Chuck. Thank you very, very much. Very, very kind. But yeah, I think, like I said, I think the biggest thing for me is like you're getting off to a start to the schedule where it's not too crazy, and I feel like the Steelers could be able to get their footing. I think they opened up, I think 3-point underdogs against Atlanta, but I mean they're playing on the road, so it's basically like Vegas is telling you it's a pick'em game. I think Vegas right now has the Steelers at like 7.5 wins or something like that. So if you want some money and you trust that Mike Tomlin is not going to let y'all down and continue his streak of plus 500 seasons, then you should probably put some money on that. Week 3 Chargers home opener. That's a pretty good one. I feel like I'm very interested to see what the Chargers look like just in terms of personality. Getting Jim Harbaugh in there, I feel like that's going to be just a really big culture shift for the Chargers. Justin Herbert, seeing what he could do. Of course, it's always cool getting to see star quarterbacks come to not Acrisure Stadium. I feel like that'll be a pretty good game. I would imagine it's gonna be pretty expensive, home opener, but that's a pretty solid matchup. Really excited by Indianapolis. That game to me is gonna be really fun to watch. Indy is one of those teams that I've already got circled this year as like a team that I'm gonna be paying a lot of attention to because I think they got a lot of really interesting players. I think Steichen is one of the best young play callers in the NFL. To be honest with you, I think he's fantastic. What he was able to do last year with Gardner Minshew, of course, the Steelers a little bit of a revenge game, right? Like they had dominated that Steelers Colts matchup for quite some time, and then last year they ended up losing on the road in Indy, but I think that'll be a fantastic game. Really looking forward to that one. But they got a lot of guys that I'm just like really interested in. Like I'm interested to see Anthony Richardson's development. Of course, they got AD Mitchell, my dog. So that should be a really fun matchup. Week 5, prime time, Dallas. Man, the ticket prices for that game, I haven't looked, but I am sure that it's just absolutely outrageous. I mean, Steelers Cowboys. I mean, that's an old school kind of 70s rivalry. Two probably the biggest two fan bases maybe in the world. So that's gonna be a pretty fantastic game. I feel like, of course, unfortunately, like it's still ingrained in my head that 2016 Cowboys loss, man, where they was headed down the field like I don't know, like a minute left, and then Ben had the fake spike to AB, and they go up. That crowd was crazy. I mean, it's such a fun game because it was back and forth really all game. And then unfortunately, I will never forget the Cowboys going down and scoring in like 40 seconds right after that. But that was a tough one, but be a good game. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of Cowboys fans. I'm sure that I'll probably try to get to that one, but that's gonna be definitely a hostile environment. At Las Vegas, Steelers played there last year, right at the beginning of the season. So Vegas, a kind of interesting team as well. They were, I mean, I definitely agreed with the decision to bring back Antonio Pierce. They were headed in the right direction. I feel like over the second half of the season, that defense under Patrick Graham was really punching above their weight. But I was really surprised that, I mean, I think they wanted to get a quarterback. I think they probably would have taken Michael Penix if he was there at 13 in the draft. But they missed out on quarterback. I mean, right now they're running with Minshew. I mean, which I guess he did beat helped the Colts beat the Steelers last year, and then they got Aiden O'Connell. It seems like there's going to be a quarterback battle there, but I don't know. It's definitely going to be an interesting matchup there, but I think that's a pretty winnable. I feel like these next couple in this stretch are kind of winnable right before the bye. Um, get the Jets and the Giants at home. Both those going to be primetime games as well. Not really sure. I mean, we talk about the Jets first. I mean, the Jets are really, that defense was playing fantastic ball again last year. I mean, they've got a lot of star players, of course, like Sauce, Quentin Williams, even some of their linebackers. I feel like are still kind of underrated. DJ Reed's an underrated player. I feel like the Jets definitely defensively are going to be a really nice challenge for them. Salah going to have them prepared, I'm sure. Offensively, I feel like it's just a big question mark, man. Like, I mean, what is Rodgers going to be? Didn't play last year with the Achilles. Like, what is he going to look like physically? I'm sure his arm is probably still like mostly still there, but you just never know. I mean, being injured for a full season and then coming back at his age is definitely, he's in a pretty unprecedented situation there. So be interested to see. I think the Jets, to me, it's going to be interesting to see about their offensive line because, with Rodgers at his age, I mean, you're definitely going to need to, make sure you protect him. They did add Mike Williams, Malachi Corley, some other weapons to go along with Garrett Wilson. Of course, I was a huge Garrett Wilson fan coming out of the draft, so that was, one of my guys for sure. And he's been a really good player thus far in some less than great circumstances for sure with the quarterback play and the offensive coordinator situation in New York. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. I have no clue why they would put Steelers Giants Monday Night Football. This was the biggest surprise as far as like, they did end up getting, I think, 4 primetime games. Of course, with the flex scheduling and stuff, there's always a chance that they could, end up with more or less than that. But Steelers Giants is not something that I would necessarily want to put on Monday Night Football. But nonetheless, that's where we're at. So, be interested to see if Daniel Jones is still a starter at this point in time, like midway through the season. I mean, they had some interest in potentially bringing in Russell Wilson. He took a brief visit to New York before he ended up signing with the Steelers. So some connection there. Of course, the Giants went out, drafted Malik Neighbors. I'm really excited to see like how he transitions to the league. He's gonna be a definitely a tough matchup for the Steelers, especially because Neighbors aligned mostly in the slot at LSU. The Giants have a lot of slot receivers, but I imagine that they'll probably get him matched up inside. Still a lot of question marks as far as like who's going to be the slot corner for the Steelers, but that's definitely something to watch for there. And I feel like getting what is that a week 9 bye week? I feel like a week 9 bye is pretty much what you want, right? Like I've always kind of thought that there was a little bit of a disadvantage whenever you're talking about getting a bye in the first 6 weeks of the season, especially once they added that that 17th game or whatever. I feel like you want the bye a little bit later so you can kind of get your bearings and get a little bit of a breather for the home stretch. And I feel like a week 9 bye was pretty good. Gonna kind of go through the chat here, make sure I'm not missing anything from you guys. Like I said, y'all can drop whatever y'all want in here, and I'll try to answer as many questions as I can, or talk about whatever you guys want to talk about after we kind of get through the schedule. See, we got about 35 people in here right now. If y'all could just hit that like button for me on the stream, help get this out to as many people as possible. I really appreciate it. Second half is a bit of trolling. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the second half we'll talk about that. It's definitely gonna be interesting. What's good, Daniel? Happy Friday, man. Get your hopefully get your weekend jumping a little bit. Last day are brutal. I'm not concerned about the division. Having 4 in a row seems like an injury trap. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Alex saying he likes the schedule. Like I said, I see the pros and the cons with it. But that's really just how I try to look at anything in general. But I think there's definitely good and bad, for the first and second half of the schedule, which we'll kind of go over here in a second. Hopefully the Steelers have better health, especially during the last half of the season. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. The reason why too, like I don't get too caught up in like the strength of schedule talk. Like everybody's talking about, like, oh, they got the second or third highest or toughest strength of schedule or whatever. It's really like the NFL is just so much about not just who you play, but when you play them. You know, is the quarterback healthy? That's a big part of it. The Steelers have had seasons where they played really good teams in the second half of the season, but the quarterback's not healthy. And like at that point, it's such a huge advantage than what you would previously be looking at on paper. For example, if this Chargers game that they got week 3, like they'll probably be favored by a couple points. I would guess, but if Justin Herbert, hopefully nothing happens to him, but if Justin Herbert were to get hurt and be absent that game, the Steelers would probably be double-digit favorites or something like that. There's so much unknown about like who's going to be playing when. It's hard for me to get too wrapped up with it. I just try to take it week by week, but I understand, the concerns and all that stuff with the schedule from other people. Just kind of moving on. At Washington, should be a good game there. I mean, Jaden Daniels is definitely going to be a interesting opponent. I would imagine that he's probably going to be starting probably throughout the entirety of his rookie season. They got Kingsbury in there as offensive coordinator. I actually think that they may be a pretty good match. I'm not a huge Kingsbury fan. If you guys remember when we were talking about OC candidates, we talked about Kingsbury a little bit on the channel, but I'm not a huge fan. But I do see how like his vertical based offense could be some of the air raid stuff would be good for Daniels and a fit with him. Washington's got some playmakers too on the outside with Dodson and McLaurin. I do think the Steelers kind of do. I think there could be some benefits to this too, getting to play Washington and then back to back, playing Baltimore. The Steelers are really familiar with Lamar Jackson, but Jaden Daniels is kind of another mobile quarterback, a guy who really likes to run, get out the pocket, scramble, pick up yards with his feet. So, I mean, that could be a nice little tune-up. You can install probably some similar stuff in terms of how you want to attack those guys and how you're going to combat that quarterback mobility aspect of the offense. But I do feel like, it's kind of interesting that they're going to be playing, running quarterbacks back to back like that. Baltimore, get them at home for the first game of the series this season. Definitely going to be an interesting one there. I mean, I was kind of thinking about this today. I'm actually in the middle of like writing a piece for Steelers now about the biggest weaknesses of all the AFC North teams as we sit here today. And I think like the Baltimore thing is interesting because I think on paper, Baltimore's got the best, the best overall depth chart when I just look it up and down. I think obviously they went to the AFC Championship game last year. Yeah. They end up winning the division. They got the MVP, whatever. I mean, there's a lot of reason for those guys to be optimistic, but at the same time, I do have some concerns about like what that defense is going to look like without Mike McDonald. He was just such a visionary. Some of the cool things he was doing from a schematic perspective, in Baltimore was really cool. And I know that it's gonna probably look pretty similar, but you never know how that's gonna look. And then I think my biggest concern with Baltimore, what I think is their biggest weakness is the offensive line. I'm just not really. I have a lot of question marks about how that offensive line is going to carry over throughout the season. I mean, they're going to be starting seventh round pick last year. Andrew Voorhees looks like he's going to be the starter. He missed all of his rookie season because he got hurt training for the NFL draft last year. I mean, I was lower on him as a prospect in general, but just seems like, starting him off that injury is definitely going to be sketchy. And then, Ronnie Stanley, he's been like in and out the lineup pretty much throughout, the last couple of years. Seems like, it's a chore for him to really make it through games with some of his health concerns. I like Linderbaum, but like the issues at guard are really scary to me. And I would definitely be interested to see like what that looks like. Lamar also came out and said he's down to like 205. That's really, really light. That's like what he was like early in his career. And I don't know. I think that's an interesting conversation too, because Lamar, I think some of the sturdiness, the weight, the muscle that he put on was actually a good thing for him, because you saw him break out of even more tackles. And even though maybe it took away a little bit of his straight line speed, I feel like, the reason for it was probably to try to get him through an entire season. And him being 205 behind in my opinion, a little bit questionable offensive line is, I don't know that that's the approach that I would have taken, but it'll be interesting. I definitely think, Baltimore's probably the favorites for the division, but that's going to be that's always going to be a street fight for sure. At Cleveland, man, what is it? Have the Steelers in Cleveland have we played in Cleveland every Thursday night? Like, I feel like, see, they had a Thursday night Cleveland game. I want to say, was it 2019? Because that was the Mason Rudolph, Myles Garrett game, right? And then they had a Thursday night game. I think it was either, what was it, 2 years ago, like in the first month of the season. So I don't know. It just always seems like Steelers Cleveland Thursday night game is just what they want to plop in there. But that'll be an interesting one for sure. Cleveland, they just don't really, to me, defensively, they're going to be really good again. It just all comes down to what Watson's going to be. Even like some of the advanced numbers and just, I mean, the tape is what it is. I mean, you guys see him play on Sundays, or y'all see the highlights or stuff that's on Twitter. He just hasn't been the same guy since, 3-4 years ago. I'm not sure that guy's coming back. So, I mean, Cleveland's going to go as far as like he can take them. I mean, we kind of saw that last year too, right? Like, Cleveland's defense was fantastic. I know Houston kind of had them in a leg lock a little bit in the playoffs with some of the schematic advantages they had on offense against that type of defense. But, Schwartz, he put up, Cleveland was the best defense in the league last year. But at the same time, when you get into the playoffs and you're going to be facing these guys, obviously Mahomes, Josh Allen, you can even probably throw CJ Stroud kind of in that conversation. When you get into the playoffs, you start having to face off with these, elite quarterbacks, man. You're going to have to put up some points. And I'm just not sure that Watson's that guy that's going to be able to get them over the hump in terms of winning a playoff game or anything like that in a division, in a conference, really, that's kind of loaded at the quarterback position. So I think that's kind of an interesting, we'll see what he looks like. So they got at Cleveland, and then they get a 10-day rest, head to Cincinnati. I mean, Bengals an interesting team too, right? Like they seem like they're trying to hold out to maybe go for one more run. T. Higgins seems like they're going to end up keeping him. Trey Hendrickson also, like, he was back at camp after saying he was potentially going to retire or whatever else. But those guys, it seems like they at least want to try to make another run at this with Burrow and those that core of weapons on offense. They did some things on the offensive line. They signed Trent Brown. They drafted Amarius Mims early. I actually liked that pick a lot for them. I thought that they did some good things. They did lose DJ Reader on defense, so that's something that's going to be notable in terms of like how they're going to stop the run, because he's kind of been a really key cog in their defense. But they brought back Von Bell. But again, this is kind of the situation with Cincy is like, is Burrow going to be healthy? And that's like kind of what I was saying earlier about the schedule thing, and why I try to just almost take it week by week is because, like, you just don't know. Like, Burrow wasn't himself at all last year. He didn't even play very well when he was out there at less than 100%. So really just kind of depends. He's had some trouble staying healthy. I mean, he's gotten hit a lot in Cincy, so we'll see what that looks like. But and then they get Cleveland again the next week, so four straight divisional games. I acknowledge that that's definitely it's definitely unusual, and I'm curious on if like we're ever gonna see that again. Without playing a divisional opponent the first 10 weeks and then rattling them off like that. I think the toughest like part of the schedule though is like the last month of the season, which could be perceived as a good or bad thing. The Steelers always, or at least in years past, probably since what was it, the 2020 season, really over the past 3 seasons, the Steelers have been playing their best ball over the past like month, over the last month of the season. So this is typically where they've recently been peaking at the right time, but they're going to need it, man. Going to Philly and going to Baltimore in a span of 6 days is really rough. And then you add on that they're going to have to play Kansas City on Christmas. That's just, it's a gauntlet. Like that stretch of 10 days is definitely the toughest. It's the toughest part of the schedule. Philly to me, I am a little bit lower. I mean, I was a little bit lower on Philly entering the season last year. And I think that we saw some potential concerns, especially with Jalen Hurts, just in terms of like what you can do with him offensively. He does a couple things extremely well. His ability as a runner, especially in short yardage situations, but his prowess as like a deep ball thrower is awesome. They've got two outstanding weapons: AJ Brown, alpha; Devontae Smith, one of the better route runners, kind of wide receiver twos in the league. But at the same time, Philly is kind of basic in like what they do on offense. Like they don't use play action a ton. It's really it's almost a little bit predictable, and their defense just fell off a cliff. Now, they did end up getting Quinyon Mitchell and I think Cooper DeJean both in the draft. So I expect those guys to play pretty early because I think most of the guys that they had playing last year in the secondary look cooked, like Bradbury, even some of the safety play I felt like took a dive. Darius Slay was a little up and down. So we'll probably see that. I mean, at this point in the season, the last month, it wouldn't be surprising if the Steelers were seeing some rookies out there in the secondary against Philly. But, Philly's always built through the trenches. They typically had a really good pass rush. They typically have a really, really good offensive line. I mean, I think they've got pretty much everybody back except for Kelsey up there. But, I mean, the way Philly drafts, they always kind of have replacements on deck and stuff like that. But at Baltimore, 6 days later, and then Kansas City. I mean, we can talk a little bit about Kansas City, man. Like, it's just tough for me personally. I like to enjoy Christmas without having to be, stressed or deal with work, Steelers related stuff. I'm not sure how you guys feel about holidays. How do y'all feel about the Steelers playing on holidays, whether it's, we'll just say like Thanksgiving or Christmas? Do y'all like when they play on those days or not? For me, I think it really just depends. But, Kansas City, man, it's brutal. Even at home, I understand that could be a cool experience, maybe going to that game, but I don't know. Patrick Mahomes like the boogeyman to me, and just in terms of the things that he's done to the Steelers and I think the 3 times. I'm looking for the stat right now because I tweeted it out. Here it is. Mahomes in his career versus Steelers, so 3 games. He's 76 of 97 for 988 yards, 10.2 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, 1 interception, 144.4 passer rating. Not great. It's not great. Yeah, it's been tough. The Steelers have had no answer really for Mahomes, and like really even like those numbers itself. I mean, you look at the 14-1 touchdown interception ratio in the 3 games. I mean, they honestly could be worse because I mean, it's not like any of those 3 games were like extremely, extremely close. I mean, a couple of those are blowouts. So, yeah, that's gonna be a tough one, man. And then Cincy, the TBD in terms of when they're gonna play that. I really like I really like how the season, like how they've done that in the past couple of years. I believe how you basically finish with a divisional opponent. I really like that because I think it ups the stakes. You got those divisional races that are coming down to the wire. I think that getting those games against divisional opponents makes it matter more, makes that last week, and we see less like resting of the starters and everything like that heading into the postseason. So I think that's a good thing. But yeah, I mean the last month's pretty brutal, man. It is pretty brutal. December stretch, yeah. I mean, it's definitely tough. Yeah, I saw somebody tweet this on my timeline too. Since the exceptions, nobody's won the division 3 years in a row. It's definitely It's definitely interesting. Who's left? Who's next up after Queen left? I think it might be Trenton Simpson from Clemson. They drafted him, I think, in the third round, maybe a couple like 2 years ago. So that would probably be my guess on who's going to play there. Simpson is a really good athlete, but I definitely don't think he's on Patrick Queen's level. Just my opinion. Don't like viewing the Steelers on holidays. Yeah. I just like to be able to chill, man. And I feel like the 1 o'clock start too is kind of throws a wrench into it a little bit as well, because you're gonna have to get. I mean, I don't know if y'all got. I guess it depends on if you got kids or younger siblings or anything like that. But my daughter wakes up super early, so that's not gonna interfere with my stuff. But still, I kind of wish I didn't have to do that. You guys don't like having cardiac arrest on Christmas? What's wrong with you? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. We may not get cardiac arrest, man, because it might not be close enough to get to get cardiac arrest. We'll see, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I'm not gonna. I usually don't give like my record prediction or anything like that until like we get closer to the start of the season, especially because, like I said, man, anything can happen. Injuries, and, additions, training camp. So I try to hold off on my win loss like predictions until the week before the season starts. But I will say, like, I've been spot on the last couple of years in terms of predicting their record. So, or at least like within like a game or two. I think a game of the last 3 years record wise. So we'll see. It's gonna be interesting next couple of months for sure. Cody says it's fine playing a bad team. Playing Mahomes is stressful. Yeah, I mean, playing Mahomes in general is just absolutely terrible. It's just legitimately not fun. Best player in the world for my money. It sucks that the Steelers got the unfortunate end of the straw there, right? Like they ended up playing Brady for 2 decades, and then right as like Brady's career is winding down, enter Patrick Mahomes. But that's how the cookie crumbles. I wish those guys would have been in the NFC at least, though, so you didn't have to see them as much, especially in the playoffs. But yeah. See, we got quite a few more people in here now. I appreciate you guys tapping in with me. If y'all could just like that video, click that like button for me. That helps, support the channel. Free, easy way. And then like I'll stay on here and we can talk for a little bit. I'll probably stream for another 10, 15 minutes. If you guys got questions on anything, I will answer whatever on anything Steelers related, football related, NFL related. Y'all hit me. I'll stay on until I can pretty much get caught up on your all's questions. But I feel like the only other like news type thing that happened was the Cam Hayward thing. He went. Of course, he told Steelers Now, Allen and them, that he wanted to play for 2 to 3 more years, and that the Steelers and him were already engaged in a contract negotiation talk, which. Not really super surprising, I guess. I was kind of surprised he said 2 to 3 more years this early, just because Cam's at that age, heading into 35 years old. That definitely winding down his career, but he said he wants to still play. I think that's a good thing for the Steelers because the depth kind of behind him isn't anything to like write home about. But he is entering the final year of his contract. That's going to make for some. I feel like uncomfortable conversations. He's coming off a season where he wasn't very productive, particularly as a pass rusher. It's definitely going to be difficult. I did a kind of reaction to that whole thing that you guys can go watch on the channel. It's one of my most recent videos, like 15 minutes long, where I kind of broke down the ins and outs of that. But I think in the last day or two, I think he said that he wasn't going to go to OTAs. So I mean, OTAs are voluntary, so I personally don't get too all up in arms about whether or not guys are in OTAs or not. I mean, he even pointed out that they are voluntary. He's usually there, but with these negotiations ongoing, he's going to stay away, but he's still going to be working out and stuff. And I mean, as long as guys like come to camp, ready to go, healthy, in shape and stuff like that, I don't know. The OTA thing, is it good if they're there? Yeah, absolutely. But is it absolutely, just a huge talking point if somebody's not there for those, couple days? Then not really, man. Not to me. Just got here. Did I miss anything? Yeah, we just went over the schedule. Nothing too crazy. But if you're interested, of course, you can just go back and watch the stream. Once it ends, you can kind of rewind and get the thoughts on that. We just kind of chop that up game by game. Still think the Steelers are trading for a wide receiver. Man, I hope so. I hope so. But I'm not really. I mean, I'm less confident about it now than I was a couple weeks ago when the draft ended because I just felt like that. With the direction that the draft went, I really did feel like they were going to try to strike on a veteran. I'm just really not sure like what the cost is and who's really truly available, right? I think some of the people like Zach or Nick or somebody tweeted out saying that they had been in contact with Michael Thomas from the Saints, veteran guy. He's had a lot of trouble staying healthy, but he's played a lot. He's played a lot in the slot. He's played a lot outside in that Sean Payton offense. But I mean, I don't know, man. I trading for a receiver. I hope it's still on the table. It just really depends on like who it's going to be for. Cortland Sutton wants a new deal. I kind of talked about like that to me is the big hang up. Just like him being at his age, I think he's 29, offering him a new contract extension, him being the guy that you're going to lay the foundation around. It would seem weird to me just in terms of messaging. But I don't know who else is going to become available. You just never know. How do you feel about our offense? Upset we didn't bring in a big wide receiver. Yeah, I mean, I understand it. I don't know, man. I think the big thing for me about the offense is, the Steelers are going to have to run the ball extremely well, like much, much better than even the Falcons did in the past couple of seasons. They're going to have to be extremely efficient running the ball. The offensive line is going to have to gel pretty quickly. And then you're basically going to have to rely on the running game, providing the efficiency of the offense. And then you're going to have to rely on, Russ or Justin, throwing the ball down the field to create explosive plays. And I think the thing that I'm most looking for, man, to be honest with you, is, I've studied Arthur Smith's offense. I think I've watched dang near every game from the past couple of seasons. So I'm really familiar with it. I'm going to be having some like X's and O's type film stuff coming up on the channel that I think you guys will like, just going over some plays, some concepts from his offense, so that you guys can get a better understanding of like what you're going to see in the fall. But I think the thing that I'm most interested in is like how is Arthur Smith going to change? I think that's the thing is, he's had this really strict philosophy of like wide zone, a lot of play action boots, throwing the ball down the field off that play action. The drop back passing game has been lackluster, but at the same time, like what tweaks is he going to come up with? Because I think that's the big thing that I think people always miss about like play callers is, play callers are always going to have identities, but the best play callers are almost have that like amoeba type personality where they're able to shift over time and kind of tweak and continue to build things so they can stay a step ahead of the curve. I think that's the thing is like offenses, typically ahead of the curve, and then defense is really reactive, right? But I feel like almost like defenses have kind of caught up to Arthur Smith's offense in the past couple of years, and I'm interested to see like what he's going to change in order to start to get these defensive coordinators back on their heels to where they're not as keying in on a lot of the stuff that they like to do. But it's going to be interesting to see, man, for sure. Yeah, I mean, a big move. I mean, like, do I think they need a guy like Brandon Ayuk? I would love to have Ayuk, and I would do that trade. Like I would trade whatever the value is for him. But at the same time, I think they can be a good offense or like a above average offense, like without a huge trade. Now, do I see them being, a top 15 offense, like with the current personnel that they have? That would kind of surprise me a little bit. Just personally. But again, I mean, there is a path to that. If you're really good running the football, you get the best version of like, Russ, whatever he has left. The offensive line gels really quickly. You're able to establish an identity up front, win in the trenches, win with your bigs. Like, Mike Tomlin said, I think that there's a path to them being pretty solid on offense. It is tough, man. It is really tough. Just because I do feel like you look at the weaponry, I mean, you can't look at it and say that they got better. They lost Deontay Johnson. They've kind of replaced him with like a bunch of these kind of other parts that you're probably going to have to piece together and see what you can get out of each of these guys. If there's an injury to Pickens, we'll be doing a lot of 12 and 22. I don't even want to speak about that because yeah. I mean, I think Pickens, this is another thing that I've been like meaning to write about, just been so busy over the past couple of weeks, but Pickens is their most important player on offense next season, man. Like, I don't even think you can make not that I always say quarterback position is the most important position on the roster, but at the same time, like you just look at what the depth behind George right now, and it's non-existent. He's gonna be the driver. I feel like, of the passing game, and I just feel like the drop off between Russ and Justin really probably there's a little bit difference just in terms of some of the things that they can do, but at the same time, I don't feel like there's going to be a huge drop off there if something were to happen to Russ. But I feel like if something happens to George, uh, man, I don't even want to think about it. So we won't dwell on it. A lot of y'all's questions about pass catchers today. Um, I mean, we'll probably have a better understanding about this to see where Roman's at as a route runner, to see how they're going to utilize him. Like, another thing too, I was tweeting out some clips on my Twitter that you guys can go look at. But in the run game, Smith, and something that McVay and a lot of those the tight split guys are doing right now is they're having the Z receiver almost as like a lead blocker. They're getting them extremely involved in the run game, and there's just some limitations. Like Roman, he tries so hard as a run blocker. Like, I love the effort, but at the same time, like, there is like certain stuff that you're not gonna be able to do with him just because like of his size, him only being under 5'11", 180, 185 pounds. So I'm just curious. And like, I think they're going to mix and match, to start the season, assuming they don't trade, right? So say they don't get a trade, it's probably going to be a mix and match situation. Like, it'll probably be some Van Jefferson. I would say that he's probably the leader in the clubhouse, maybe for wide receiver 2, or like that Z spot on the outside. And then, probably Roman mixed in there. And over the course of the season, I imagine Roman's going to get more and more playing time. The big thing is, like, I do feel like Freiermuth is going to be the number 2 passing option. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing either. Like, I think that that's how it should be, just in terms of target distribution. Pat's got a huge opportunity, really heading into next season, right? Like, he's going to be in an offense that, features the tight end a little bit more than the offenses he's played in years past. And there's a lot of targets up for grabs. You think about Deontay Johnson, just over the course of his Steelers career, he's been a target hog. So, like, you think about, George Pickens is going to get more targets, and like those things will filter down. But I think there's opportunity for Freiermuth to have a huge season, especially entering a contract year. There's money to be made on the table, and I'm really excited for what he's going to do next year, because I think that I've been seeing some stuff in Arthur Smith's offense that I really think fits what Freiermuth does well as a pass catcher. So I'm really excited to see what that looks like. What's up? What's up? What's up? How we doing? How we doing? How we doing? I'm gonna stay on for a couple more minutes, guys. I'm gonna hop off. If y'all could just, drop me whatever questions y'all got. I'll try to answer as many as I can before I got to slide out of here. Any concerns with the quarterback room behind JPJ and Jackson? Depth feels thin. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of improving guys, right? Like Corey Trice, Darius Rush. I wrote on Steelers Now that, those two guys were huge winners, in my opinion, just in terms of like how things have transpired over the past couple months. The Steelers really didn't. They lost, Levi Wallace. They lost Patrick Peterson. They lost James Pierre. They let those guys walk out the building, and the only person they brought in was Dante Jackson. So there's just kind of like what I said about Freiermuth, just in terms of like being winners of the offseason. There's just a lot of opportunity ahead of those guys. So can those guys carve out roles for themselves? What does that playing time look like? The cornerback 3 spot where you're the primary boundary. I'm talking about like just depth chart wise, but where you're the primary backup on the boundary, like you said, you're one injury away from having to play 100% of the snaps. It's not like some of these other positions where, you might have to play this guy 40, 50%. Like, you're having to be out there every single snap. So I'm interested to see what those guys look like. I think it's tough, relying on a guy like Trice, who's really struggled to stay healthy, even though how much I loved his college tape. Darius Rush definitely fits the athletic profile that those guys have been like really targeting in the draft recently at the cornerback position. But it's tough, man. It is a lot of improving guys for sure. They signed Anthony Everett. That was something else that happened in the past couple of days. A guy that's spent time in Baltimore. He's bounced around a little bit. I think he played in Vegas 2 years ago, sat out last year with an injury, but he's another guy that, probably inserts himself into the mix. So we'll see. Great play callers adjust. Yeah, I mean, I think it's not just like throughout the game. It's over the course of like your play calling career. Like, I use this example all the time, but it's a really popular one that a lot of people are talking about. But McVay, he was real wide zone heavy, right? And now he's like the guy who's 100%. I mean, not 100%, but like he's the number one gap running team. Like he switched his stuff up from heavy zone to now he's heavy gap. They run a bunch of duo and they do a lot of creative stuff off that. So I think football just like it moves in cycles, right? Like you're seeing a lot of these defenses. They've kind of learned how to, not necessarily shut down, but the defenses have caught up a little bit to the wide zone stuff and some of the ways that you can play the bootlegs and all that stuff schematically. So I think it makes sense. Even the personnel's changed, right? Like you're seeing a lot of lighter defensive linemen, just the way like more bare fronts, stuff like that to combat wide zone. So what some of these offensive coordinators are doing, like McVay, getting back to old school power football, start running gas, start running power, and I hope that that's going to be I hope that that's going to be some of what Arthur Smith likes to do. But I do think some of the stuff I did see, I'm gonna kind of do probably a video soon on this too. But I tweeted out some clips on Arthur Smith's wind back counter, so you guys can go look at that on my Twitter. But there's some examples there of like him being able to pull the center. I think Zach Frazier be nice to get him on the move a little bit in those type of concepts. But I'm like I said, man, the number one thing I want to see is like I feel like I have a really good handle on like what Arthur Smith's offense is and what it's been. I'm really wanting to see like what it's going to be and like the changes. Because like Mike Tomlin said, man, like Russell Wilson, Arthur Smith, those guys, even Justin Fields, those guys all got kicked to the curb, right? Like they're all getting their second, third chances or whatever. They're getting their second chances in Pittsburgh. And I think you guys, it's not any different than, in all of our day-to-day lives, right? Like you fail, you got to get back up. Like, how are you going to respond to adversity? And I'm excited to see what that looks like for those guys. So I'm cautiously optimistic, but I do acknowledge that there's definitely there's some risk there for sure. There's a reason that those guys were available. What do you think the odds are of a reunion with Marcus Golden? So Dupree signed with the Chargers. I wrote about this for Steelers now a couple days ago. You guys can go check it out. But I wrote about Nick Herbig. I actually think Herbig's ready to take that edge 3 spot, man. I wouldn't be against though Marcus Golden coming back. I know the Steelers have had a difficult time kind of managing Highsmith and Watts snaps. Like they've been playing an incredible amount of snaps just over the recent seasons and stuff. And Watts getting up there in age a little bit, like he's about to turn 30. Ideally, you'd like to be able to reduce that a little bit, save him for a little bit later in the season. But I understand, like you got one of the best players in the world. You want him out there at all times. But I think Herbig's ready, man. I saw enough last year to where I would be willing to give him, the floor to try to prove himself as that edge 3 guy and the first guy up behind those 2 starters in the rotation. Now, if Marcus Golden wants to come back and, there's an opportunity to bring him back on the vet min or something like that, absolutely. It's tough because, I mean, you're talking about a 4th edge rusher that doesn't probably not going to play special teams. So that's kind of the one thing about it. I think that was probably the holdup a little bit with Dupree too. But Dupree ended up signing with the Chargers, and Bosa. Did they still have Khalil Mack? If they do, I mean, neither one of those guys have been healthy, so there's probably a better path to playing time there for him. Will Washington ever get targeted? I mean, probably more this year than he was last year, but I mean, if you guys probably remember, for those of y'all that were around for the draft 2 years ago, I pretty much said like Washington's never going to be a high volume player. Like it would surprise me if Darnell ever caught. I don't even know if Darnell will ever catch more than like 30 balls in a season. It's just like you're drafting him for what he can do as a blocker, for some of the stuff you can throw to him in the flat. You can get him on a runway, use his athletic ability. I think there may be some untapped potential just in terms of like what he could provide to you in the red zone or off the play action game. But, his athleticism is he's kind of a linear player. Like he doesn't sink his weight and change directions extremely well. So that's always going to limit him as a route runner. And kind of like what we say all the time on the channel, like if you're not creating a bunch of separation, it's going to be difficult to get you a lot of targets. And but I mean, I'm hoping he's a little bit bigger of a part in the offense. And like I said, I think I forget the exact number, so don't quote me on this, but I want to say like even Smith's offense last year, a lot of people talk about Kyle Pitts production and things like that, which, some of that is valid, but I still think they were top 5 in targets to tight ends. Of course, it helps when you're playing multiple tight ends on the field at the same time, but there's going to be opportunity for him too. So how do you feel about the Steelers not drafting Mitchell when he's available? Oh, it broke my heart, man. Broke my heart. I like Zach Frazier though. I was okay with it. I would have been more I think I would have been like more heartbroken if they'd have taken another receiver over him. But I'm excited to see what AD is going to do with Richardson. I think he's a really good fit for that offense and what they need to. I didn't really touch a lot on Thomas. I mean, he just hasn't been healthy enough for me to like really have an opinion. And I would really have to go look at like what his film looked like last year briefly before he was out of the lineup. I mean, Thomas was never an overly athletic player either, so that's the thing. And I would need to go back and look at the splits, which I guess I could pull those up real quick if I have Pro Football Focus up. Um, like with Thomas, he's also, I mean, he's a bigger wide receiver. He's a guy who's played, in that New Orleans offense, which is really similar to like there's some carryover between the Sean Payton stuff and Kellen Moore, Tom Arth, who's now the Steelers like passing game like coordinator. I guess I don't know what his like title is, but he's kind of there's some carryover in systems there. So I guess that's something. But Thomas, even last year, like he played 30% of his snaps in the slot. So what does that look like? It's been 2019 was like his last big season. He's only played a handful of games pretty much each season since then. So it's nothing for me to get overly excited about, to be honest with you. Now, if I went back and watched his tape or something like that and I found him impressive, then I would probably be I'd be willing to change my stance on that. It's just not something that really gets me too um, excited, I guess, about that as an option. All right, 6:50. We'll go 3 minutes. We're going to do fastest 3 minutes right here. Do you think Fautanu will start week 1? I do. I think he will start week 1. If I had to guess, it'll probably be a right tackle, but I do think he starts week 1, and I actually think that that's the right decision to start him week 1. I think he's much more ready than Broderick was last year. I would start him right away. Benjamin, love your content. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you guys very much. Does Arthur Smith have a history of utilizing fullbacks? Yes, he does. This is actually something we can talk about real quick. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this, but yeah, the fullback's a pretty heavy spot in this offense, man. I was talking about the wind-back counter concept, which we'll talk a little bit about that, but they've ran that out of 12 personnel. They ran it out of 11. They've ran it out of 21. So like they will use 2 backs in the backfield. They even used some pony stuff last year. Yes, the fullback is absolutely a part of his offense. It is kind of interesting because I think the Falcons fullback last year, his name escapes me. It might be like Keith Smith or something like that. I think he's a free agent. But you're asking about Hayward. Hayward's an option there, but Michael Pruitt is also an option. So Pruitt's been playing tight end for the last couple of seasons. He came over. He's been with Arthur Smith pretty much like the majority, if not all of his career, I think. Excuse me. But Pruitt started his career at fullback, I think 2019. So he's an option there too. And Pruitt's kind of like one of those guys that's like a blocker first tight end. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure they'll give Hayward some chances there. You could probably do some things with him as a receiver out of the backfield too. That's definitely something that I'm going to be watching for during the course of preseason, just getting to see how they're going to utilize those guys. But I do think Pruitt has a good chance to make the roster. I also want to see, kind of how many tight ends they keep. I want to say Atlanta last year. There were times last year, I think in Atlanta, where Arthur Smith had 5 tight ends on the roster. So if you're looking at like how the roster construction could play out this year for the Steelers, it wouldn't surprise me if they end up keeping, 4 guys. Actually, I kind of anticipate that, to be honest with you. And that's even assuming everybody's healthy. So I hope Frazier ends up being a good pick. I think Frazier's going to be a really solid starter, man. I really do. Probably not the same type of upside, or definitely not the same type of upside, in my opinion, as Mitchell. But I do think that, they needed a center. They got a solid one. I think Frazier's going to be a really good player for the Steelers for a long time. Washington is fullback. Hey, you never know, man. You never know. Do a little mixing and matching. All right. I appreciate you guys for tapping in with me. I'm going to hop off here. Streamed a little longer than I anticipated, but I thank you guys so much for your questions. Just before y'all head out, please make sure you like the video, subscribe, all that stuff. All that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. I got some really, really fun stuff planned for next week. Like probably the piece of content that I'm most excited for that I've ever done, like in my like content creating career. That'll probably drop Monday or Tuesday. So you guys won't want to miss that. I'm really excited about it. I can't wait. I'll be honest with you, man. I can't wait for y'all to see it because I think it's gonna be so much fun, and you guys are gonna like it so much. Like I said, so it's definitely gonna be cool. And I will check you guys again next week. I may have a video up here in the next couple days before then, but Monday, Tuesday for sure at the latest for my next upload. But as always, y'all be sure to enjoy y'all's weekend. I will catch you guys on the flip side. Peace and love.